document. Okay. Finally, I think that this information, like this, or thinking about your legacy, is incredibly important, especially for women who do not have a seat at the table. That's why we have to make our own table. And whose prices for artwork are typically 40% below the men. And we are the first ones who will recognize the importance of our own legacy, our own contribution to the art of this century. And then finally, dream big. I love to talk about this, and because I think dying is a really interesting thing, and figuring out what to do with the life stuff. So, if any of you are thinking of starting cells, I want to know about it, and it's just info@squeakcarnwath.com.
What's the address again?
Oh, my first name is Squeak, S-Q-U-E-A-K, last name Carnwath, C-A-R-N as in never, W-A-T-H, and it's info@squeakcarnwath.com. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. This has been really extraordinary, and unfortunately, we're going to have to pass a mic between everyone.
We can do that.
And we're going to ask a couple of questions and then open this up, because I know all of you really want to take advantage with these incredibly experienced panelists that we have. They've all presented so much information, and one thing that they have in common is they've also all worked with the legacy of another artist, someone, not their own work. Squeak with Viola Fry's legacy, and Daisy with her mother, Elizabeth Murray, and of course that we have Terri's incredible presentation that she's made about Sonia. But I'd like to ask, we have so many things that we have to do, and artists very often are stymied by the number of things that we see that we have to do. We're sort of overwhelmed. We have to do so much, and it's everything we have to take care of. So I have a question. If you could think of one thing that was really essential that your artist did before her death. There was one thing that made your job, made everyone's job easier, that facilitated your reaching those goals, something that was done and put in place that you would recommend, something that was just really fundamental to getting on with everything.
Viola did nothing. I mean, did she document anything? Oh, did she document anything? No. It did, and she had a studio assistant who I kept saying, we started this over 20 years ago when I was in my 50s. And I said to the studio assistant, take a picture, throw it in a box, write what it is. Did they do that? No. Yeah, so, and did Viola throw anything away? No. Should she have? Maybe some student work, but maybe not. You just don't know.
That's not the question.
Well, I don't have an answer, is my point.
Okay, maybe Daisy does.
Thank you.
Thank Gary.
I would have kept that your husband? Yeah.
Oh, that's her husband.
We all need someone like that.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I would, not enough, absolutely. I do equate that with the time and the discussion surrounding estates and also her age. She was only 66 when she died. Also, she was very involved with her galleries, really took care of everything and were really responsible because she just wanted to focus in the studio. Somebody came in and photographed everything in her collection, and we made an Excel sheet, and that was incredibly helpful. I would say in terms of the Richard Diebenkorn Foundation, Phyllis Diebenkorn played a tremendous role in simply not only having what we call institutional knowledge, but creating an office space and retaining information. So she herself kept her hands on everything. And she kept files, she had administrative assistants come in, and she made a list when the artist was alive, because he had in his mind where things were. And that was the basis of our database, which ended up being the basis of our catalog resume.
Sonia did, can you hear me? Okay. Sonia did actually several things, not just one, but she appointed Farley and all and I to manage her legacy. She did not ask her children to do it, which was really important. She put some money in place. It's unless you're very wealthy, it's never enough, but she really put enough there for us to spend a couple of years being able to do this work, because we had to get paid something to do it. It's not been a lot of money, but it's also so we could actually do the outreach to do this and to do some, to do some publishing, etc. But she also made sure that her archive was organized and cataloged and placed in Bancroft Library. It was super important, and that archive now is there sort of for perpetuity. It's a whole other conversation, but I think those were really, really important things she did before she passed away.
Can I just say, I did remember one thing Viola did.
Oh, what did she do?
She left $3 million, which is great.
Oh, that's a lot of money. That's significant.
No, that's,
significant.
it is, but we're spending it, and, I mean, we aren't. The foundation has to spend it to do, because they have to document and do all this other stuff. So, anyhow, and I'm one of these people who's always worried that we're burning through it. It's another story.
Okay, one of the reasons why we organized this, or Jan really organized this, but this came about because Jan and I were sitting in a diner a few years ago, and Jan was telling me a story about how she got all of her artwork out of her basement. She was really worried about her kids getting all of this work after she passed away and not knowing how to deal with that. Her kids were not having any control of it. So what's really inspiring about Jan, which I want her to talk about this, is that she was able to approach museums first locally and then all the way to the Smithsonian, and then got a lot of her work placed and then in those collections, and then that was added to her resume, and she's alive and well. So she was able to do that in her lifetime. So I think that you should really talk about that. And that's why we're here today, actually, because of that conversation. Like, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago when we had that, and then we had it again last year, and so started to be here today. So you should definitely talk about it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have you heard of artworkarchive.com? Has anybody heard of that?
No.
Amazing. It's a website. Please write it down. Artworkarchive.com.
Artworkarchive.com.
Oh yeah, I've heard it. They're out of Denver, Colorado,
It is
actually.
an amazing,
Right,
easy,
that's correct.
In
Yeah.
maybe 4 days' time, I was
Right.
able to put 91 pieces of work on, and there's Provence, and there's
Right.
you can keep track of shows and where things are, and all of that. And
Yeah,
it's-
that just came out not that long
It
ago.
did, it just did. So I really highly recommend it.
Thanks, Rain. So Jan, can you talk about that?
I'd be happy to. So I am not even a mid-level artist as Squeak is, and I have never had, well, not never, but not in the last 25 years, had a gallery representation in the Bay Area. I've shown with other galleries. So I basically have been on my own. And I decided to look to institutions where I had some relationship, where they would see some reason for my work being in their collection. Not just because I want my work in MoMA, but because I lived in a small town at one point for a few years, and there was a small museum, and I could write to them and say, I was here, I was connected with these other kids who also became artists, and my work was taken into the collection. Or I contacted a university with a fine museum where a friend is an art historian, and I said, I have this work that I'd like to offer that also included portrait of that particular artist and some other artists and art historians, and there was a body of work that they could take in that was meaningful for their history and for their collection. And I just went in different areas of my life and looked at where there was a connection and relationship. And I think that's really important. When we talk about the success that artists have had with developing a legacy, it's been based on relationship. Terri had a relationship with Sonia. Sonia was already important and meaningful to Terri. It wasn't somebody that she had no experience with. With Jay DeFeo, she and Leah Levy had a relationship. There was a reason for Leah to be committed to somebody that she knew and had worked with first. So I think that's really key, is looking at your own life and seeing where you can draw those connections.
Can I ask a question? So just in practicality then, for artists who are living, we're all living right now. Right. So
You're sure?
I think we are, right? I hope so, actually. I'm interested, Terri, that I wonder how artists even then develop a relationship with somebody who can manage their career, right? That seems to be a big gray area. It's not advertised. It's becoming more and more. And then the Joe Mitchell Foundation has an excellent program called Creating a Living Legacy Call, which is really, really wonderful. They provide, workbook for artists to refer to. It's independent, which is really wonderful, so that there's, in addition to the book that you suggested, and then other books that are out there, there's something there, but it doesn't replace that contact, as Jan's mentioning. There is the rising, I would say, part of the field is independent curators who are becoming more freelance, more and more, as the art world is evolving and a lot more people are coming into it, etc. So how do you suggest an artist finding somebody like you to manage that? Is it about developing these relationships with curators, museums, etc.? Because I think that would be a lot easier, and also working with like the Joe Mitchell Foundation and other places to be able to manage like with their call program or other foundations or nonprofit organizations if they were to decide to work with them with their estate. It's nice to have somebody to be a liaison.
It's an interesting question that you pose, Sharon, because different people come into this field kind of through a back door. I'll give you another example. The David Ireland Foundation is a very interesting story, and the person who's doing programming for the David Ireland House was one of my students at one time. He didn't get that job because of me, but it was like younger artists coming up who are looking for work, and actually David Ireland's, you may know the story or not, but David Ireland's house, when at the time that he passed away, there was no money, and so somebody took on that project and purchased the house, and eventually wanted to do some programming to advance his legacy. So they hired this young man, Diego Villalobos, to just do programs. Well, he's been doing the kind of thing that we're doing with Sonia, all these programs to contextualize David's work, and they bring other people into the mix, and they charge money to come to the house and to see the work. So they're sustaining it and building it, and then eventually it's a way to continue to promote the work. If you look at David's track record of sales, it's very minimal. Actually, it's not about that. His legacy is really about that, about his house, who he was, what he did. There's a lot of writing about his work, so it's interesting to think about what does legacy mean. So, I mean, it's a multi-tiered sort of process, so it's an interesting question, and each case study is different. I happened to work with Sonia. I wasn't her assistant. I mean, I came into it, as a curator, freelance curator, really. And she's just, because someone else introduced us, she said, yes, can you do this? And I said, yeah, sure, let's talk about it. And it just evolved over that 10-year period. I was busy still teaching and doing other work, writing, et cetera. So I don't know if that answers your question.
So it's sort of like it's an organic thing for everybody.
Yeah. It really is. We have not, it's an interesting issue because I work part-time with Olive Fimova. She has actually created a business of doing this, and that is happening. And that gets complicated too, because it gets into the question of, do you have an existing relationship with the artist? Can you develop a relationship with the artist? We got involved with an artist named Carol Doyle Peel, who, and she had taught at CCA for many years. I didn't happen to know her, but some friends of hers who were committed to her approached us because they needed an appraisal of her work. She was sort of at the end of her life, and they knew that she was going to pass, but they brought us in to like, what can you do with this? Well, not everybody's the same. You can't, the Museum of Modern Art doesn't want everybody's work. It's impossible. So what do you do? Not everybody's we're different tiers. I mean, Squeak, you talked about that. You see yourself in a particular place. Some artists had very little market sales. So it's a whole, we could do a 16-week class about it, It's just a very, very complex circumstance, but I hope I gave you a little bit of
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Jan, Daisy wants to say something.
Daisy.
Oh, well, all I can say is that at the Diebenkorn Foundation, Andrea Ligori, who's here with us today, who's our managing director, she started working for the foundation well before it became a foundation, but has become close with, but was working with the family because the family was working alongside. So each staff member has really been selected by the family, and a lot of it has to do with trust and feeling comfortable. And also giving the people that you do hire the space to do what they need to do in order to promote the artist and letting go a little bit. We have hired a person named Jason Andrew, who's friends with Sharon, and he came to us because he works for the Jack Tworkov estate, and my mother was very good friends with Jack Tworkov's daughters. So it was a personal connection, and I cannot say enough, and I'm sorry I didn't say this in my presentation, but until we hired Jason, made the decision to hire somebody else, we were just waffling and not knowing what to do. And then by getting our act together and hiring somebody to push us further, that's when we started acting. Because we got somebody who could help us move past our emotional connection, and somebody who could move within the market, and somebody who could move within representation in a way that we as family members can't. Because we have certain personal obligations, because we knew the artist, and therefore we have a different relationship with the people who knew the artist. So somebody who is connected with her, so we trust him, but I admire his work because he is fearless in terms of bringing the artist forward. And his ability to move within the family and outside of the family is really what has made him somebody who's tremendous to work with. And I'd say that's a key factor to look for if you're looking for somebody else. And especially, even if you do want to work with your family and you want your children or your spouse to remain connected, hiring somebody else is crucial.
Yes.
Do you want to say anything about that? About the finding someone to work with? I mean, how